If you were a tween boy at some point in your life, you probably consumed Berserk Boy's influences in your media diet. It's a multimedia stew of spiky-haired Dragon Ball characters and Mega Man form changes unlocked via boss kills. You even get a tone-setting and gloriously corny 2000s anime intro. I love the dramatic villain pan. Berserk Boy is great stuff, and maybe the most inspired choice is how it weaves those form changes into its platforming. Part of being a berserker means that most of your early forms are melee, and being melee necessitates closing gaps. Multiple speeds, angles, and variations of something like a 3D Sonic homing attack are the bread and butter of how you move from A to Z, which also means that enemies aren't just obstacles, but valuable, hurdleable platforms in their own right. That Sonic comparison grows in prominence the more you play, too. Squint hard enough and you might get the impression that our plucky young hero K is like this visual hybrid between Goku and the Blue Hedgehog. You've got grind rails, you've got robot commanding antagonists, and you've got these really pronounced and colorful trails as you sprint that really reminded me of Sonic Advance 2, all set to the tune of a bubbly retro soundtrack by Sonic Mania composer T. Lopes. But any game isn't defined by what it takes from, but how it takes, what it omits, and what it remixes. If you're here for a recommendation, I can confidently say that Berserk Boy is a totally good, totally playable adventure with a campy tone, great movement, and killer aesthetic. But it's also naggingly undermined by one particular inspiration that just does not fit as well as the others do. Because the thing keeping me from being in love with Berserk Boy and holding me at in like is that Berserk Boy the 4-hour action platformer is so much better than Berserk Boy the 8-hour Metroidvania. A fake-out final boss that pushes you into a return trip through all the same levels with a keener eye for those collectibles before getting to the actual ending is not only a deflating momentum killer, but one that's kind of incongruent with the frantic rollercoaster platforming that these levels were designed around. Let's not start there though. Berserk Boy begins with Kay's techie friend Dizzy picking up spiked power readings on her computer. Could it be a Berserk Orb, they wonder? We set off to validate the game's name and find that first Berserk Orb, one of 5 acquired from each of the game's main bosses, which each give Kay a new super duper form. You'll also quickly notice the biggest deviation from Mega Man. You can't pick which order you want to fight these Berserk Masters in. Level progression is as plain as it gets with a linear unlock of worlds. In the context of Berserk Boy, that's actually a good thing. You do lose that Mega Man ordering strategy that comes from prioritizing bosses based on what they give and who their upgrades counter, but you gain levels that are specifically designed to take advantage of the forms the game knows you have. Each gets their own attack, their own screen-clearing ultimate, and most importantly their own mobility spell, which runs the gamut from dashes to double jumps to literal flight. Most of those mobility spells have some interaction with enemies. Sometimes it's a reset, sometimes it's a directional pivot, but that's what changes the way you look at these levels. Getting from beginning to end is a process of doing the usual platformer shtick of running and jumping, but also identifying enemy daisy chains that you can use to propel yourself forward. That makes it less of a game with combat and platforming, and more of a game with combat platforming, where the plan is to get on a movement roller coaster and stick to it. It has an undeniable flow state to it, where you can zone out and just feel the rhythm of its movement. Levels are long, checkpoints are frequent, and you can play them all with or without a live system depending on your preference. While enemy placement in levels favors using them as leapfroggy springboards, Berserk Boy will occasionally lock you into discrete combat rooms and also serve you up a fair share of bosses. There may not be explicit counters in the rock, paper, scissors sense for each boss, but you'll quickly find which forms do which jobs the best. Your kunai form has the safest chip damage ranged attacks. Your blaster form has lock-on missiles but can't deal with diagonals well. Your fire form earns that berserk title most closely with full-on melee combos and a mean-as-hell uppercut. Sometimes it feels like these combat rooms are a little frequent, but otherwise they're a good chance to stretch the legs of Kay's combat-heavy toolkit. Back at home base, you have a hub world where you access each of the levels from that occasionally sports some objectives of its own, and also is where you buy permanent upgrades. And it's here where you first notice the game has some ambitions beyond just conventional action platforming. Those upgrades are prohibitively expensive. A playthrough of all the levels once over will barely get you like a quarter of them. I knew this thing had with Metroidvania elements written in its store description. You could clearly see inaccessible doors requiring forms you don't have yet, but the specifics are manifest after you kill the final boss. He escapes, you don't roll credits, everyone kind of depressingly wanders around the hub in fear of him still being out there, and you find out that your next course of action is to talk to this robot guy who will power you up for a rematch if you collect 50 Berserk Boy tokens. You'll have some by this point just natively, there's 5 on each level tucked away in secret spots, but many are hard to find or outright inaccessible on a first playthrough. For me, it basically demanded an entire replay of the whole game to get what I needed, and importantly, that second play was just not as fun. Not just because of the diminishing returns of having just played the game, but also because this more scavenger hunty second pass just does not fit with the way our Berserk Boy moves through the world. Those fluid enemy railroads that you ride and bounce off of are all of a sudden a whole lot less fluid, where you're constantly needing to interrupt your flow state to check out some corner in hopes of a secret token. There's lots of dead leads too, because half the time you find a secret, it's just a resistance fighter to be saved, which increments a meter that you need to unlock that level's time trial. It was clearly going for the satisfaction that comes with going back to the beginning parts of a Metroidvania with all of your new powers, but it doesn't work in Berserk Boy both because even these beginning levels are fast-paced, action-packed platforming levels, and because there's no mystery about what lives behind those doors. There are no secrets to find, only Berserk Boy tokens and the resistance fighters. Without that sense of discovery and mystery, you have an experience that tries to emulate the mechanics of a Metroidvania, but none of the incentives. It ends up feeling really tedious, and I was constantly thinking to myself of how much better it would be if that lame upgrade shop had its rewards hidden in the levels instead. Reminder, I do like Berserk Boy. That whole first half experience of platforming and fighting your way through levels is enjoyable. You get this escalation of power and options with the new forms, you get tightly balanced retro difficulty without being sadistic, and you worm your way ever closer to killing the final bad guy in a satisfying progression. It's fun if not groundbreaking, I've just got the lamest elements most fresh in my head. It got me thinking a lot about framing. If this same exact retread was an optional post-game for enthusiasts rather than a mandatory requirement for credits, it would have been way cooler. But if you're here to beat the game, you will not get a satisfying story or gameplay conclusion until you've eaten your vegetables and gotten all those tokens. Berserk Boy is still a charming and action-packed nostalgic package that is worth a play. I just pause on whether or not it's worth that second play. It's a great platformer and a bad Metroidvania, and as much as I don't want to judge a fish by its ability to climb trees, what am I supposed to do if it insists on climbing?